Hey everybody, how's it going? Jenazad here. So I thought I'd make this video to talk about JIYAN and how useful he is at dealing with some of the hardest bosses in Wuthering Waves. Many people have pulled this character, especially because he is the first banner of the game, but I think a lot of people don't realize that he's not only just good at the Tower of Adversity, but the tactical hologram he actually really shines. One of the biggest reasons is that JIYAN is a very simple and easy to use character. He doesn't require a ton of combos or all sorts of techniques. He's very straightforward and he's incredibly good at parrying. He not only has good AoE, but his single target is pretty decent in the game as well. I'm currently using his weapon, but it's really not required. You could be using a Battle Pass weapon or possibly the Helios Cleaver 4-star as well if you don't have either of them. Also, these are my echoes. I do go for the arrow set, of course. It is the highest damage on him. I use the monkey echo as my main one with 2 arrow percentage main stat echoes for my elites and then 2 attack percent 1-stars. As you can see though, I don't really have insane stats on a lot of these, and I don't even max the 1 cost echoes overall because they rolled so badly and I didn't want to waste any more resources. Also, I maxed most of his skills, however I did not get Heavenly Balance as I didn't have any weekly rewards left. Also, I do have 1 Resonance, however I have not activated it on JIYAN. Don't ask me how I got that, by the way. One of JIYAN's best characters to pair with is Mourning Aix, as he does buff the damage of JIYAN. As you can see, I don't really have him built at all, except I did put the Moonlit Cloud set on him, just so that when you use his outro skill, he'll buff JIYAN even more. I didn't really up his skills, and he has no Resonance. Also, Verena is one of the other best supports in the game, and she is likewise, just like Mourning Aix, only on the healing set to possibly buff JIYAN. However, I did get Gift of Nature to buff JIYAN's damage as well. She also has no resonances whatsoever. For the rest of the video, I'll be showing you a couple of the hardest boss battles currently available in Wuthering Waves, the level 80 Mourning Aix and the level 70 Tempest Mephis. Also, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Oh boy, here's the Mourning Aix. Now this fight is a real pain, not because this fight is actually an insanely hard one, but because it's one of the most bugged fights in the entire game. Overall, it doesn't really have a huge health bar, but it does hit pretty hard and it has some really game-breaking issues, especially with the camera, and sometimes when you parry, you just take damage anyways for no reason. As you can see in this fight, I'm mostly doing fine at the beginning, not really getting hit by anything or in any danger, able to easily get some damage down. I try to use as many intro and outro skills as possible because every time an intro skill hits the boss, it actually deals a ton of damage to his posture. Also, you'll notice in a case like right there, JIYAN is incredibly good at parrying. Every time he has that spear out, when his sword turns into a spear and is spinning around, he has a lot of active frames on his attacks. That makes it so any attack that could possibly be parried is really easily parried. That's one of the biggest powers of JIYAN, is that he has so many frames on his normal attacks and his skill that it makes him a parry machine, and not many characters can actually do the same level of parrying as he can. Overall, I try to spend a lot of time on Verena as well when the boss is out of range or is in the middle of attacking, so that I can build up another outro skill to use with JIYAN. One other important thing is I specifically start with Verena, then go to Mourning Aix, then go to JIYAN. This makes it so I get the damage boost from the Verena rock, then I go to Mourning Aix, get his outro skill, which is 38% extra heavy damage, then I go to JIYAN, and all of the damage in his ultimate is actually considered heavy damage. This is why he gets such an enormous damage boost from Mourning Aix, and even though Mourning Aix is a 4-star that's almost completely unbuilt, he's actually providing a crazy amount of support. So as you can see here, I'm spending more time with Verena building up that outro skill, and every time the boss is in range, I just swap to JIYAN and I spam as many attacks as possible. This boss doesn't quite parry as much as the next one, however it does have a good amount, especially when its eyes glow red. Certain enemies will have red eye glow attacks, and when they have that, it makes it so skills like JIYAN's are incredibly good to parry. I believe they can only be parried by skills, but I'm not 100% sure. As you can see here, the camera suddenly just locking onto something out of the map, a little bit of an issue with this boss. The boss is about halfway dead at 2 minutes and 40 seconds, which is almost halfway time, but we are cutting a little bit close. As you can see, swap to JIYAN, he has a really easy parry when he uses his skill because it just lasts for so long. If you throw it at any enemy, it's a giant AoE in front of you. We're going to swap to JIYAN here, throw that attack out, and you also notice that I slid backwards at the same time. Something that you can do, especially with characters like JIYAN that have a lot of active frames on their attacks, is you can throw his spear out, but then at the same time you can use a backdash. This makes it so if it would parry, It extends past JIYAN's hurt box and is able to parry the attack, but if you miss it, you also are dodging at the same time. That way, you're kind of doing both at the same time. You're parrying and dodging in case you actually missed it and got it wrong. This is something that characters like JIYAN are incredibly skillful at, and could be a useful trick for you when dealing with some of these hard boss battles. So far, this run has been going pretty cleanly. However, you have to be really careful because this boss can easily clip you when you're unprepared, and an attack like this is very easily parried also by JIYAN's skill again. Its eyes glue red when it was flying around in the air, and that means that JIYAN can easily parry it with his skill. This is the same attack again. However, am I going to get it? And I do. It has such a giant hitbox in front of him that even though the boss was flying all over the place and even slid right around my JIYAN, he still managed to hit it. So the boss only had 1 minute and 20 seconds left, but my Verena dies. Unfortunate, but it doesn't really matter too much at this point. She added a good amount of damage early on, and now we still have Mephis and JIYAN, and JIYAN does so much damage by himself that even without supports, that it's not really that big of an issue as long as they don't get hit on JIYAN as well. Also, since this is the difficulty 5 boss, it continuously increases its attack over time. So even if an attack wouldn't have killed me early on in the fight, at this point, any character that gets hit will instantly be one-shot no matter what kind of attack hits them. So you have to be especially careful as you get close to the end of these boss fights. So only the higher levels actually have these extra mechanics, but usually they don't really matter because you're so under-leveled that they usually one-shot you either way. Now the boss gets up and it immediately starts doing its scream attack. When it does that, it's going to go into a huge string of other attacks right after. This is one of the most annoying run enders that you could possibly have against Mourning Aix. Not because it's super dangerous, but mostly because it wastes so much of your time that if you're cutting it really close, the moment it goes into this, you might actually just lose the run immediately. But as you can see, we're able to survive it just fine, and the time, even though it's only 15 seconds left, we easily get it at the very end. Thank God. What a pain. Next, we have Tempest Mephis. This one is difficulty 4 rather than 5, and it might be a lower level, however, it's generally a more difficult boss. You have a lot less time to actually be able to attack it as it's constantly teleporting around, and overall, it's really scary if you don't know how to parry super well. Fortunately for us, we have JIYAN. Look at this. Look at that. His spear lasted so long in the air that the boss actually went into his attack that it made it really simple to parry. Of course, his first couple attacks in his attack chain are pretty normal, but starting from his third, when his sword actually turns into a spear, he becomes really insanely good at parrying. However, there's still a lot of time wasters, like abilities like that from the Tempest Mephis, that can make it so you're really cutting close on actually killing this boss in time. Almost every attack that it does is parryable, however you sometimes have to be really careful that when you're in the middle of a certain attack in your attack string, the next hit might not come out in time, so you might actually have to dodge rather than parrying some of these attacks. As you can see, I went from my 2 supports straight into JIYAN into a huge burst of damage. Also, when JIYAN is ulting like this, as most people probably know, he becomes a parry god. His ult is basically a 360 non-stop parry machine. I did take a little bit of damage there from one of its unparryable attacks, but that shouldn't really matter as long as they don't get hit again. As you can see, the boss is wasting more time, it's starting to feel a little bit threatened, and the clone comes out with a laser. Fortunately, I was able to see that and dodge it in time. It becomes really difficult when they're just constantly doing so much on screen at the same time, and I had many runs actually lost to the boss attacking me from off screen with its clone. As you can see here, another really easy parry. JIYAN's normal attacks are just so clean and fast that he's easily able to parry almost every attack just on instinct, but the moment that you know an attack is coming, you can actually prepare with this 3rd to 4th attacks in a chain so that you can guarantee that parry in case you're a little bit worried about actually landing it. So we go to Mephis, we build up his outro, but then he dies. But that should be fine, right? Mephis is really good, but we still do have Verena for a good damage boost for our JIYAN, and the boss is not quite halfway dead yet, but we are making really good time as it hasn't been 2.5 minutes yet. As you can see, the copy came in but instantly got parried by JIYAN's dragon. It just is so simple to parry things when he's just constantly attacking in a 360 around him. Anytime he's ulting, you probably won't have much trouble with Mephis, as long as it's not doing one of its unparryable attacks. As long as you're just mashing your left click, you'll be constantly hitting it over and over. Even though we don't have Mortefi, we still have a lot of damage. Mortefi is amazing for the giant burst, especially when the boss is knocked down, but even without him, JIYAN just has a lot of damage in his skill set. He's constantly able to attack, his skill has a really low cooldown, and his ults, even without the extra heavy attack damage, just adds so much to his basic attacks that you're able to just spam so much damage on the boss. Even if Verena wasn't here, I have some confidence that JIYAN would actually be able to do this provided it had a little bit more damage. In fact, I believe that you can solo this boss with just JIYAN if you have some really good gear or are over leveled a little bit. As you can see here, we took a little bit of damage, but it doesn't really matter all that much. We're getting so much damage on the fallen Mephis. JIYAN's ult does so much damage, and looking pretty close to the end of the path here. As you can see, we do a lot of damage to its stagger gauge right there in a short amount of time. The only real time that you are able to attack Mephis is really when it's staggered. Otherwise, it's just constantly wailing away at you or having its clone attack you. There's so few openings that even though this isn't the tankiest boss, it feels as though this boss has an infinite health bar. Sometimes you'll have a character that can hit insanely hard, such as Calcharo, but he won't be able to find many openings in his combos to actually go to deal with Mephis, making it really difficult. But this is one of the powers of JIYAN. JIYAN is so simple, and he can cancel out of his combos into other ones so freely, not having to deal with a huge string and all sorts of techniques, that you're able to just really easily deal with the flow. You go from a parry into a dodge into an attack, and you're not really losing out on that much damage. And then we're able to take out Mephis finally. What a pain of a boss. Verena dies at the end, however, I don't really think it matters that much because it has no HP left, and we thankfully finished one of the hardest bosses. Well, until we do difficulty 5. That's about it from me though. Thanks a bunch for watching this video. If you enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you next time.